The UDR CAST is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDR CAST, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDR CAST encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDR CAST. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at BILLWARDLIFE and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Okay, welcome to another edition to the UDR CAST. The UDR CAST stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. And today I have a special guest, a guy that's become a very good friend of mine. I met him probably about 8 months ago. And in the last probably 4 months, we've become pretty fucking tight. I've got to know a lot about this guy. A couple main points about this gentleman. It's Matt R. He's a recording artist, but I didn't know that when I first met him because he's a pretty humble guy. I first saw him do a little gig on a Zoom thing, and I was like, wow, this guy's got some fucking shit going on. And then I got to know him a little bit and, hear him around in the rooms, and I was, very impressed with the humility that he was walking with. And, it just kind of came to be through my own prayer and meditation that we ended up kind of joining forces in a sense. And so I wanted to do a special segment today with Matt on his journey, knowing him as a human being and also as an addict alcoholic and also as a recording artist and kind of walking through all of those components together to see why he's changed his career and how he's changed as a human being and the message that he's carrying as an addict alcoholic for others and how he does that in his life and through his music. So Matt, really happy to have you here and to have a chance to interview you and kind of walk through some of your path here. So welcome today, bro.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Bill. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Matt, do you have any opening words before I kind of get into, what I want to get into here? And I'm just kind of running on the fly, but do you got any opening words that you want to start with before I start grilling you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, welcome to anybody new or relatively new to recovery that may be stumbling upon this. It's by a God of my own understanding, the 12-step recovery program that I work and trying to change a lot of these character defects in my old behaviors that held me back from the man that I am today for so long. It was always a struggle trying to live humbly and to live honestly and do the kind of work that I do in the hip-hop industry. It's a very ego-filled world, and trying to figure out kind of where I sit and where I fit in with all of these people, the way it fueled my addiction and the way it brought me to some of the places that it brought me to, with fears that I would never be able to escape that, to see the life that I have today and the purpose that I have with my music and why I'm doing what I'm doing now is solely a gift from a God of my own understanding, and the ability to take my gifts from that and to give them back to other people. I think that's kind of the basis of where we're at right now, and what I'd like to touch on.
How much time do you have in clean and sober now?
I celebrated my first year in recovery about a month and a half ago, so coming up on 14 months this month.
And quickly, what's your take on all mood and mind-altering substances? Is that what you're free and clear of?
Yeah, that was, I think, the first real breakthrough of mine this time around. Over the last 4.5 years, I'd made many attempts to try and find this way of life. But anytime I tried to put the drinks and the hard drugs down, I would double down on marijuana and the occasional prescription pills and things like that. And I was never able to really find clarity, let alone find an opening for a higher power to kind of step in. And that spiritual malady, that God-sized hole in my life, just continued to grow and to grow and to grow the more that I fed it with substance. And, coming around to recovery this time, I had no intention on putting down all mind-altering substances. My drug of choice was cocaine, and I was a very, very heavy alcoholic. So I figured if I could just put the booze and the coke down, that everything would be fine. So I still had a pretty strong reliance on marijuana when I got here. But when I found the program that I work, that is all mind-altering substances, my sponsor had said, I can't force you to do anything. He's like, but I do strongly suggest that you give this a shot. And I did, and I've never looked back.
10-4, good stuff. And why I asked that is because, with the legalization of marijuana and it's so easy to go to the doctor with symptoms and get prescription pills for whatever it is. And, the alcoholic addict, they're relief seekers, right? And we're going to rationalize and justify whatever it is. And, I see a lot of people not being able to connect with their higher power. And that's the thing that actually changes our life, because they're blocked with these things. And I know you're a bit younger, and I see that in the younger generation. So I just wanted to get your take on that for other people. So yeah, let's, what was it like? You're 30 years old, right?
Just about.
You've been doing music for how long?
I first started writing lyrics when I was 12. It was kind of a closet thing. A big part of my story and the struggles that I faced was, I dealt with a lot of self-worth issues. I tried to, you hear a lot of us being the actor and wearing the different masks, and I would apply that to every situation in my life, and I was never really able to express who I truly was. So there was a lot of fear in doing what I was doing, being a young white hip-hop artist. I was made fun of a lot for kind of being that guy. Everyone knew that I was, very involved with hip-hop music, and it just, it allowed me to kind of keep what I was doing in the shadows and not really show anybody. So I didn't start really becoming outward with what I was doing until I was about 18, 19. And around that time is kind of when I jumped in full force. I was working with a rap battle community here. I was doing some judging and promotion of these events. It was a very, very negative kind of environment. I still love it to this day. I have to really make sure I'm spiritually fit before I partake in any of that. But, it was something that people had bugged me for a while to do. We wanted to do like a judge on judge battle, and nobody knew at this point that I had been writing for as long as I did. And when I finally caved and did it, it really drove that ego. It really drove all those things that I'd been missing my entire life. I had a room of 300 people focused entirely on what I was saying. And the feeling that I got after that first performance was similar to my first real, positive experience using drugs or alcohol, with the feeling of what it did for me, not what it did to me. Later looking back to see kind of how that fueled my ego and the way that I used what I was doing for wrong. I used it to get the women. I used it to make myself seem cooler than other people. I used it to kind of present this like status about myself, even though I was an absolute mess throughout the entire thing. I was able to go on stage and perceive myself to be this like godly figure, because I can jump on a stage and grab a microphone and kind of make people believe whatever I wanted. And I think, in falling into that cycle was a big part of me continuing to play the actor, to not really spend any time to figure out who I am, not only as an artist, but as a person. And it just allowed me to continue to be a chameleon, to blend to the situations and to make myself feel or think a certain way because of the effects that I got from performing.
As you walk through the years of 12 to 18 years old as you're writing, and you didn't really jump out into the limelight until about 18, but you were kind of forging some behaviors and character traits and kind of reacting to life from like 12 to 18 years old. What were some of the masks that you had to wear? And it's not just you as a hip hop artist, like even me as a young teenager, when I first started doing dope at like 13 or 14, drugs and alcohol took an exhilarating part of my personality, and it allowed me to kind of hide behind it. And I remember feeling a lot of times, I'd be at home after, partying or whatever, and I still felt like inferior, and I still felt these feelings, but I didn't really understand anything. I just thought it was life, and I was fucking confused. And I look back at it today, and it was the spiritual malady. But then when I would go skateboarding, or would go to a party, or I would go do the things that I was good at, I was great at fighting, I got that fucking respect. And that kind of gave me the relief that I needed till I felt like shit again. So it was always a continual chase. What was it like going through those years with music or with whatever masks that you were hiding behind, and what would your music reflect?
Well, I mean, it had always been all or nothing for me. Growing up, grew up with a single mom. My dad was in active addiction for a large part of my childhood. My mom was probably in the class of the heavy drinker. She worked really hard, worked a couple jobs, went to school, did the best she could to raise us. But on the weekends, she liked to have fun with her friends. And, I remember a lot of instances of like playing bartender and stuff well before the age of 10. It was looked at as like probably pretty cute, and I remember having my first few sips of alcohol around that time. But, the first real chance that I had to go all in, I went all in. I was at a wedding for my aunt. I was 10 years old, and it was a big old fashioned Italian wedding, and one of the old grannies spiked the punch with a full 2-6er, and I knew that there was alcohol in it and I wasn't supposed to drink it, but I started. And within a half hour to an hour, I was the life of the party, and it was, you could see the look on my family's faces like, oh, we probably shouldn't let him do that. But I was a fucking riot, dude, and running around, dancing around. It was the first time that I was able to really ever break out of self. I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, overcompulsivity disorder at a very young age. I had very outwardly vocal and physical tics. I stood out like a sore thumb a lot. I was fairly overweight for a large part of my life. And that first time that I got loaded, none of it mattered anymore. And thankfully, for some time, when I woke up the next morning, 10 years old with the fucking wild hangover, I was like, oh, maybe I don't like this, But I found marijuana just before my 12th birthday and was a daily user from the time I was 12 until this time around in recovery. And I kind of looked at every substance I ever used and every means to mask myself I ever used as an all or nothing. When I found writing and I found an outlet for myself, a lot of the stuff that I was writing was super dark. I was fascinated with the horrorcore genre, and I was talking about, murdering and fucking rape and killing people, like, not that these were ever any ideologies that I stood behind, but, I started watching horror movies at a young age. I found horrorcore hip hop at a young age, and it was something that I really kind of fell into. And then when I found the community of horrorcore artists around the time of like 13, 14, it was all in there. I spent, years and years and years locked in my bedroom, chatting with people online, trying to, learn from people about, what I was doing with my music, how to write. I wasn't recording anything at this point, but I still have, dozens of books from that time. And that's kind of all that I did. I was robbed at a pretty young age, and that kind of isolated me. I think I was 13 the first time I was robbed, going to do something I shouldn't do. And it just like created more fear, and then allowed me to express myself in more negative circumstances. Whether it was drugs, whether it was alcohol, whether it was feelings of worth that I got from other people. When I found something that made me feel good, I changed everything so I could feel that. There was never any moderation in any sense of the word, whether it came through my music or it came through substance. It was always all or nothing for me.
Did you find a personal identity in, first, I guess, horrorcore, hip hop, and basically did the identity of Matt Robar come through being a hip hop artist? And is that what you believed you were as you kind of started, growing up in those teenage years, 16, 17, 18? And did people look at you like that?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Again, I kept so much of this to myself. The people that I was connecting with were largely in the United States. There's not a big community in that genre of music here. So a lot of people I was talking to were a lot older, 25, 30, 35-year-old men and women from all over the United States for the most part. And I kind of got that validation through the computer screen, dealing with the self-worth issues and things that I did. I didn't start really becoming outwardly showing of what I was doing until I was about 17, 18. Started working with a record label online to help them do promotions, and we worked on bringing them to Canada for the first time. And this was around the time this artist started getting some particularly large traction. And when I was able to kind of come out with this, I still remember tons of experiences with people where like they just didn't fucking believe me. And then that kind of created a power struggle there where I was like, no, like I had to prove to people that this is what I was doing. And that was kind of the shift for me when I finally decided to really start doing this, to start recording music, to try and start putting music out, to make this like show to the world, whether it be social media or in person, that like, no, this is me and this is what I'm doing. But in the same breath, I wasn't able to kind of step into the position and be like, no, this is me. I still had a different version of Matt when I was on these forums and on the computer. I had a different version of Matt when I was interacting with people at school. I had a different version of me with my family. I had a different version of me with my friends. And the further I got into music, the more those lines started to get blurred where, then I started working and then I tried to go back to school. And I created so many different versions of me that towards the end, I really had no fucking idea who I was anymore.
Wow, that's such a big point that you bring up there. I've done a lot of step fives in the time I've been in recovery, and that is very prototypical of the addict alcoholic. I think with a lot of normal people too, but nobody makes more of a mess of wearing masks and living in these delusions than we do. And when I do these step fives, I see most people are trying to be somebody else for so many other people that they don't know who the fuck they are. And they're trying to be someone for somebody else always. And that is at the core of most addictions, if you ask me. So anyway, when you decided to kind of step out at 17, 18 and start doing this for real, what was the motivation and, how did it go when you first started?
Well, I think like my first real experience was when I got to be a part of this event at 17, got snuck into the bar, was able to drink at the bar. And this is like my first real experience of, ever really drinking in an establishment, to being a part of something that like made me feel special. And the instant gratification I got from that is kind of what boosted it moving forward. I was like, well, if I can do this and feel like this, then I should probably keep doing this, you know? And it went from me, you know, being afraid of doing this to like trying to do everything that I can to continue to do this because it made me feel good. Not only was I able to, you know, start drinking and using drugs socially in an environment where people were doing it and it made me feel better for doing it, I guess. But the ego boosts and that feeling of being a part of that came through the events and came through eventually performing and things like that. Like it was always just, it was a means to make me feel better. And when I finally found what made me feel better instantly, you know, I go to this event, I, you know, start smoking some weed before I go. I start drinking as soon as I get there. The event starts and I get that adrenaline rush of being there. That was it, you know?
Wow, that's pretty cool. So as you kind of move through your career and basically life, trying to build a career, you're juggling work, you're juggling writing music, you're juggling putting on events and participating in events. How did this go along with your drug and alcohol usage, and how did it ramp itself up? Of course, you're in an environment where it's totally promoted and it's acceptable and it's everyone's doing it. So tell us how it progressed through those years.
Well, I think, you know, up until this point, I didn't really start heavy drinking. I didn't start using really heavy substances until I was around 17. And then kind of getting into this environment, it really helped. You know, my first performance was in Vancouver, and, you know, I was 19, just got a credit card. The credit card was going to last forever, you know, and so we started in that between 19 and 21, I think I made it out to Vancouver 11 times. And, you know, every couple of months it was just, let's pick up and go. Burn my credit card, get a new one, burn that credit card, pay some off. It was like, I had no concept of the repercussions of this. It was just like an infinite tab for me to, you know, we were going to strip clubs, we were getting limos, we were buying out liquor stores, you know, it just seemed like this was going to last forever. And in kind of creating that environment for myself, it gave that, like, I think, subconscious understanding that, like, well, if I can do this now, I can do this forever. It's going to be perfect, you know? I can go wherever I want. I got a credit card. I can buy whatever I want until you got to pay the credit cards back. You got no money, losing, you know, at this point. You know, I couldn't keep a job longer than 2 or 3 months. Everything became substance at this point. You know, it's trying to make this music and trying to do this music. I always thought that I had to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol to do it. But I look back over the last 10 years of actively pursuing music, and I have nothing to show for the last 10 years because we'd get together and try and work on music, and within the first 30 minutes, we're fucked up. We're calling the guy, and everyone's fucking, you know, it's really hard to stay focused and to work on a project when everyone's trying to yap each other's brains off because we're all flying on cocaine, you know, like the insanity of what we were doing, you know, it just felt like that's what we needed to do to continue doing what we were doing. But then you wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, we just spent 12 hours and we accomplished absolutely nothing. Let's try it again, you know?
The insanity of it all, right?
The insanity.
How were your relationships with your mom, and, you know, were you dating? The friends that you made, were they legitimate relationships? Were you an asshole? Were you starting to be really disconnected, or how were relationships?
I was thankfully always able to kind of not hide my actions, you know, but I was always, you know, a really happy drunk. I was never really aggressive. You know, I was robbed 3 times before the age of 21, and it kind of took that like aggressive route out of me. You know, I was never a scrapper. I was always a really big dude, so people didn't ever really want to do that. But I solely made friends and made connections with people for the means of using them. You know, I don't think I had any real genuine friendships until, you know, really the last couple of years. I have a lot of friends from back, you know, growing up. But the entire means of our friendship was how we could use each other to continue to get drunk or high. You know, had completely isolated myself at this point. I would find different groups of friends or different people to do music with, and I would run the route until they could see how fucked up I really was, and then I'd go find somebody else. I didn't really start dating until I was about 19, and once I kind of had the ego boost that was my music, I would use that to my advantage. It was pretty easy for me to go to a show, perform, and then swing somebody on the sole purpose of like, well, I'm an artist, and once that started working, that was like the doors had opened and I had arrived. I could do whatever I wanted because that ego boost was so high after doing what I was doing. So I didn't keep a relationship for very long. Didn't keep any friendships for very long, completely isolated from my family. It would go weeks on end where my mom would be calling me and calling me and calling me, and I just wouldn't answer the phone, and with somebody with the anxiety level that my mom has, like there was many nights where she just assumed that I was dead, and it only got worse over the years, and I seen the pain that I was causing her, but when I was fucked up, I couldn't bring myself to pick that phone up,
What kind of music were you writing? Where was your headspace at with the music that you were writing while you were using?
I was purely glorifying what I was doing, to an extent it was fairly misogynistic. I talked about, how the party life, try to really put on the tough guy act, making it sound like I'm going around beating people up and selling all the dope. And, I sold drugs off and on throughout my entire addiction, but I was probably the worst drug dealer there ever was. I learned very quickly that I couldn't sell hard substances because I was going to use them all. So then I'd sell marijuana, lower profit margins, but I didn't have to go and try and pretend to be that extra tough guy because I knew that I wasn't, But in my music, I was the hardest dude in the city. I was a big tough guy. All I talked about was smoking weed, doing drugs, drinking. Thankfully, 99% of this music will never see the light of day anymore. I had a particularly rough night a few years ago and was just kind of over it. I was like, fuck this, I'm never going to do music anyways. And I deleted all the shit off the internet. Woke up the next morning and realized that like I really don't have any of that music. The only way to access it was from where it was uploaded online. So it's a blessing and a curse. I think if people need to see that side of me, I can tell it through my story. I'm okay with people not being able to go find that music now. At the time, it was a real kick in the ass. Like, why'd I go do that, right? But it's so far from what I'm doing now with my music that it's not a huge loss for me, I don't think.
So I know part of your story, and let's kind of get to the ending years of your using, where the drugs and the alcohol didn't work for what you needed it to do anymore. And to live sober wasn't working. And like in our literature, it talks about the jumping off point. You can't imagine life with drugs or alcohol, and you can't imagine life without it. And you get to the jumping off point. And literally, you got to a jumping off point, right? You jumped off a fucking bridge. Can you give our listeners like the terror and bewilderment, the frustration and the despair, the four horsemen essentially is what we're talking about. Can you give our listeners an idea of what the end was like before, you took a step in a new direction that you didn't really even know or understand?
Yeah, it's something that I really try and make sure I highlight in my story because my jumping off point was literally a jumping off point, I had lost one of my closest friends. I was caught up doing some things that I really shouldn't have been doing. Found out that he had died. 3 hours later, was doing some runs and was robbed at gunpoint. I'd been in some pretty interesting situations in my life, but it was the first time in my life where I was very sure that I wasn't going to make it out of it. I'd gotten my pistol whipped around, beat up against the car window. I thought it was over. And when we got out of it, it was like we hear a lot of people talk about 911 prayers, right? I was so anti-God that I wasn't even able to pray my way out of that situation. So when we got out of it, it was like all self and all ego. It was like, I did this. I got myself out of this situation. Now I'm going to go do whatever the fuck I want. I stopped taking my anxiety meds cold turkey. I'd been off and on them for about the last 6 months anyways, because my using had gotten so bad and it would fuck me up a lot if I was taking my pills and using substances. So I went cold turkey, went on a 2-day bender, no sleep. And I still, to this day, don't remember what brought me to that bridge. I just remember being there. And for somebody that doesn't believe in God or the life afterwards, you know, I was talking to my friend. I was yelling at this man that had passed away. For somebody that doesn't believe in God or in spirit, the fuck was going on? You know, to my core, I think I always understood that there was something there. You know, in our literature, we talk about within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. We talk about finding a God of our own understanding. And finding a God of our own understanding is getting back to a point where we understood there was a God. And I think trying to be as outwardly atheist as I was, that was just another way for me to try and pretend to be somebody else. That was another mask of mine, was to be that cool party dude that was going to tell you your God didn't exist. You know, it allowed me to hide behind who I actually was out of fear. I was afraid of the unknown. You know, if it wasn't tangible and it wasn't physical, if I couldn't see it, feel it, or believe it, it didn't exist, right? But to my core, in moments like that, there was clearly some sort of understanding of a God or a higher power or spirit or energy, because I was sure talking to one that day.
I want to jump in there. Again, based on my sponsorship and taking people from the darkness to the light. When I first work with somebody and, you know, they're an atheist or agnostic, there has been nobody I've ever worked with that by the time we were done that chapter, we agnostics, that they stayed agnostic or atheist. And, you know, to all the atheists or agnostics out there that may be listening, this is not to offend you, but this is my opinion, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about our opinion, our experiences. And I just said my experience is nobody's stayed atheist or agnostic that I've ever taken through that, because I don't believe fundamentally anyone really is, based on exactly what you said. And I believe it's a way to hold on to an identity. It's the ego still trying to hold on to something to keep some type of separation, some identity in that is the ego, essentially. So I'm really, really glad that you said that, because it really plays into the experience that I've noted in my life as a light bringer or helper.
I think that's solely what it is, though. You know, I had no real fundamental reason to not believe in a God or a higher power. You know, I didn't have any bad experiences with religion. You know, I was thankful. My mom was kind of a believe what you want. You want to go to church? Don't want to go to church? That's cool. I never had religion shoved down my throat. But I found some really strong atheist content that allowed me to, you know, find some things that I believed to be fact with no actual scientific proof of them to be fact. But the way that it was presented to me allowed me to kind of go down this wormhole and create another mask and another version of myself. It allowed me to stand out in another way. I wasn't blending into the crowd anymore, because I could fucking spout off with some really wild shit that maybe you're going to look at me and be like, maybe he does know what he's talking about. I had no fucking idea what I was talking about. But I'd sure try and make a point in very public settings to try and prove that I did. And it was always attention seeking. Everything that I ever did in my life pre-recovery was just a way to feel better, because I had no fucking idea who I was.
Just another way to get outside validation.
Yeah.
Just another mask, another projection of some of the inner hurt that's deep inside. And that's primarily what we do. Most human beings. So the darkness before the light. So explain to our listeners and to me, you know, coming out of that darkness and how you found the path that you're on now.
Well, after that jumping off point was my first real attempt at trying to find sobriety. You know, my dad has recovered through the same program I use. He's got about 14 years, but we had never really repaired our relationship. But I knew how he did it. You know, I think it was his 4 or 6 year milestone that I got to go sit in. But through us not mending our relationship, I think kind of created some automatic resentments to me towards the program. But I knew that when I was broken enough that I really needed help, that I could use him. And I say that with a firm understanding that that's all I was doing at that point, was using him for what had got him away from substance. So it was my first real attempt. You know, I was going to meetings, sometimes 5, 6, 7 meetings a day. If I stayed in a meeting, I wouldn't drink or use. But then when the meetings are done and I'm back home by myself, you know, we call it the restless, irritable discontent, but I was absolutely fucking miserable. You know, there's a very strong difference for me in understanding what recovery is and what sobriety is, and the difference between the two. You know, I put down the drink and the drugs, and I'm typically more fucked up than I would be with them. Because for a long time, you know, and that's why I stick to the people that are firm believers and are firm activists in this program, that we're not talking about the drink and the drug or the substance. It is far deeper. You know, when you get here, of course, you want to stop drinking and using. But if that's all you're trying to do in this program, good luck. Because anytime I would, you know, maybe get a month and a half, couple months, you know, and I tried this off and on over those 4 years, but my life was way more unmanageable without the substance, because that was the only solution I had. I didn't have any means to deal with, you know, what I would call the demons or the darkness that was left inside of me. If I was able to numb it through drugs and alcohol, I could at least make it through the day, even if I wanted to kill myself. As soon as you take my only solution away, then I'm really trying to kill myself. And I'm really trying to crawl out of my skin. My character defects ramp up times 1,000. And trying to, you know, we call it white knuckling, trying to just get through the day without any resolve to the obsession of the mind that I have. It just doesn't work, you know, but I was completely unwilling to break that character of myself and get past that God word on the wall. You know, I look back now, if I could only have had the willingness that I came in with this time years ago, probably would have saved a lot of hurt for not only myself, but the people around me. Because I understand now that my strong disbelief and disposition towards the word God or a higher power was not actually something that I believed. You know, I believed that when you died, you were dead, and that was it. The lights go off, the lights are out. But I also believed in spirits. Like, if you die, you could go somewhere. So how the fuck does that make sense? But it just allowed me to play this character. And I couldn't break the ego enough, because I wasn't broken enough to really try and at least attempt at an understanding of a higher power or a God of my own understanding. And I think that's where the big difference lied this time around. It was by no means my deepest bottom, but emotionally and to my soul, that was it. You know, if it didn't work this time, I wasn't going to be here anymore. And I understood that.
You know, just touching base on, had you listened to some of this type of content when you were younger, it might have made a difference. I remember when I was young, in my active addiction, there's 2 bands that I really loved listening to. One was the Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, DRI. They're one of my favorites. And they had a song called Think for Yourself. And in the lyrics, it said, think for yourself, don't rely on someone else. And that really helped me coming out of my teens into my 20s, because there was so much peer pressure and doing things for everybody else. But that song, and there's many more lyrics that go with it, it actually empowered me to kind of walk my own path. Even though I was still using, it gave me the courage to walk a different path. And then there was another one while I was using that really hit me in more of a sad way. It was by the Suicidal Tendencies. It was called Alone. And it would talk about, you know, being alone in a room full of people. I'm so alone and all of these things. And that's how I felt so much of my life, right? The restless, irritable, discontented, being separated from my fellows. And I could be right there with you, but I felt alone. And in the literature, in the 12 and 12, it describes it as anxious apartness. And that feeling never really left. But sometimes when I would use, it would leave. And sometimes when my ego was really flared up and powerful, like, after a fight or during a fight, I felt that ego power where I felt good and everybody respected me. Or when I was skateboarding, because I was pretty good at skateboarding, or when I played hockey, like, I can look back and see all these times where the ego would love the validation, but then the loneliness still that kind of was in between all the time, that I was always trying to medicate somehow, some way. So that was really powerful that you had said that. Anyway, so as we keep moving through, you're writing this new music. Oh yeah, I remember us talking a little while ago. And you're coming out of like an industry where, let's just say it's normal rap. Your regular hip hop, and that is your audience. And now you put out this album where it's primarily recovery related. And now you're like looking at a different niche market. And the ego says it's a niche market. Maybe you shouldn't do this. What was going through your head as you're building this album, knowing that you're kind of going into a niche market? And I'll give you my opinion. Yeah, you're going into a niche market of recovery, but your music's so fucking good that anyone that hears your shit, bro, they're not going to categorize you in a niche market. It's maybe only certain people that might, based on their own ego. But if you're open to music in general, your music hits home for fucking anybody. So what was going through your head in those days where we were talking, and maybe even before that, about transitioning from normal into a niche market where now you're branded recovery?
Well, I think it created a whole new set of fears. First, I was fearful of how I'm going to get back and perform in bars and perform in clubs. And do I do this old material, even though it's absolutely not what I stand for, to switching into making content for our type people, for somebody that may be struggling with alcoholism or drug addiction or mental health problems, or, and it was a fear that, like, that's all people are going to take from this. And the few people I had review the project before I got it ready for print and for release, they're like, I didn't catch that, but my fear and the self-worth thing kind of comes back, and it's like, that's all I can see out of it. But I think it's presented in a way that if you're listening for it and if you're open to the message, you might receive it. But a lot of it is still, I think, openly acceptable to just an average listener, because again, I think a part of the fear for me was like, there was a part of my life where I absolutely wouldn't have wanted to hear what I was saying, that it would have probably pissed me off. And it's like, fuck you, I don't have a problem, But again, looking back, and I say this a lot in my shares, the thing that kept me out of recovery and out of bettering my life for so long is the only thing that firstly keeps me alive today, but it given me the understanding in this department, through prayer and meditation and trying to really figure out what my purpose is and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Not only had it helped my fears and my worth issues and helped continue to break that ego down, but it really kind of opened up the door to what this could really be. It's, again, hip hop is an industry where drugs are not only openly accepted, but they're promoted, and I wasn't sure how I would fit in coming in, talking about my experience of no longer using substance and not coming across preachy, but trying to express the importance of breaking away from substance and to finding this way of life. Because, we're at a point in society, especially in Western culture, where, because of the way that drugs and alcohol are glamorized, addiction is at the forefront. We lost 3 to 4 times the people to just opioid overdoses alone over the pandemic. It's a crisis, in my opinion. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And through the platform that I've created and will continue to create, it was kind of the relinquishment of fear for me. And in the moment of really trying to turn this over and trust that like a God of my own understanding has a plan for me, and as long as I do what I'm doing and follow that plan, that things are going to work out, that singular action of turning that over not only gave me a better understanding of what this program means to me and what turning my will and my life over to a God of my own understanding actually means, but it opened so many doors in what I'm doing right now. You know, some of the opportunities that I have at my disposal right now are beyond not only my wildest dreams, but these are things that I never would have thought possible with my music, and in a very, very short amount of time. And I had tried forcing everything in my life, especially with my music. And we're talking only a couple months here, in trying to take my hands off the wheel and trusting that like I have a bigger purpose with what I'm doing. I'm receiving so many gifts because of my new approach to why I'm doing this. You know, I don't need to be that multi-platinum Billboard charting artist. If I can do what I'm doing and impact some lives wherever I'm supposed to impact them, that's why I'm doing this now. And in doing that, relinquish my fears entirely of how I'm going to approach going back to the live show circuit. You know, I'm not afraid to go perform in a club or a bar anymore. I'm not afraid of what people are going to think about my music. I'm not scared of what I think about my music. I know that I'm doing this for a purpose that is way greater than myself. And the further I've kind of went along this process, the music's coming out like never before. And I'm very excited to see kind of where this goes, because it's something that I never thought would be possible.
And I love that, walking authentically, walking in your own truth, and knowing that there's a reason why you're doing this, and it's to be of service. And I often say you work for Creator and the people, and Creator and the people in turn work for you. You had mentioned earlier in this chat that you can write music, and you'll sit down in a session and you'll write a whole song. And I remember us talking, and you were waiting for a meeting to start, and you wrote a whole song. And you sat here in my little studio, or my living room, or fucking kitchen, or dining, or whatever you want to call this, and you laid out that whole song, and you had beats to it and everything, and it was fucking smoking. And that's not even released yet, right? Yeah. And that's like the flow of what's happening in your life. And you know, since I've known you and been part of your life here for the last, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months, you know, I've seen a drastic change in the grip that you've had on whatever the ideals have been when we first met, to this letting go process, to the paths are just opening up. And the more that you can let go and let it just flow, it just seems like the more opportunities are coming. How do you deal with the multiple opportunities and the multiple knocks on the door? Because not every path is to be followed, right? How do you discern where to go and what to do?
Solely through prayer and meditation. In finding the understanding and the answers that I needed through meditation, it's the only way that I can even start to kind of traverse what's happening right now. You know, there's been a couple, what seemed to be, you know, if this would have been a year and a half, 2 years ago, and this opportunity showed up, wouldn't have been a question. I would have jumped on it. But I think in finding the answers that I needed through a connection with my higher power, I also needed to trust that I needed those answers to come back before I made any action. You know, I have this one guy that's still kind of knocking on my inboxes, you know, like, hey, are we going to do this? I was like, I don't have an answer for you yet. Maybe I do, maybe I don't do it. But I don't have that answer yet. And if they're not okay with waiting for that answer, then it's not meant to be anyways. You know, this alone is a character trait that I've never had in my life. I felt the need to not only self-satisfy, but people please in the same breath. And if you asked me something, I needed to respond right then, because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. But in taking some time to really feel out these opportunities and to see what I think that, you know, Creator has in store for me, it's starting to work out as it should. And again, beyond my wildest dreams. But it's in taking a step back and not letting the ego crop up, not letting my character defects crop up and take that instant gratification, and slowing down and asking for answers and waiting for the answers to come. They've come. And this was a part of my program that wasn't really strong up until this, it was another entirely psychic change over these last few months. And, I wasn't sure what I was praying and meditating for. I didn't really have that conscious contact with a God of my own understanding, 6 months ago. So it wasn't really that strong of a part of my life. But now it doesn't matter what the question is. I have to stop, and I have to bring that to Creator, and I have to wait for the answer, because I've proven time and time again that when Matt makes the decisions, probably not going to go quite as well.
So being convinced that any life ran on self-will can hardly be a success.
Facts.
You're absolutely convinced.
Absolutely convinced.
And as you sharpen the intuition and you sharpen the tools that you have uncovered, you are being guided or maybe even pulled along the path that you need to go. And to get to, my opinion, to get to where you're at with listening and not making decisions based on, like, a lot of people come into the program, they get some time in and they start going, yeah, this is the opportunity. I got offered this opportunity. This is God. This is God. This is God. This is God. And I have to go here. I have to go there. Look how much money they're offering me. Look at this. But that's not every opportunity is the opportunity that we need to go for. A lot of these are just tests. And sometimes the test is, are you going to take the carrot? Or are you going to wait? Are you going to stand at the turning point and ask for protection and care with complete abandon? And are you going to wait for your Creator to really pull you down the path that you're supposed to be down, to be of maximum service, really? There's a line that I love in Bill's story where it talks about, never am I to pray for my own selfish ends, except how my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Then I may expect to receive, and that would be in great measure. And it just ties into another line that says, ask in your morning meditation how you can help the man still suffering. And I want to, the ego says, I want to be paid in great measure. And the ego defines what that measure is. But I've learned along this path, the measure that I've experienced of what that means, it means fulfillment within myself. But the ego part of me also wants some of that great measure to be outside myself, in the things that everybody kind of wants, right? Nice house, vacations, happiness in all these different areas. But I've learned along the way that that's not the goal. And I can't make anything really the goal. If I start making the thing, I've learned along the way that my focus goes back into a bleed of self. And then I start feeling worse and things don't work out for me. And I'm wondering what the fuck, I'm doing the right things. But what's actually happened is, under the surface, I made the thing that the ego wants the goal. And then things quit working. So if I stay present today and I try to be of service today, that's the purpose of where I'm supposed to be. It opens the door and it opens the path for all those things that you're talking about. Have you kind of come to that same understanding?
I'm kind of forced to at this point. This path that I'm taking and trying to figure out what my place is in this world goes against the fundamental ideas of how you market yourself as a music artist in any industry. I can't shovel feed my music down any listener's throat, because I'm not making music for everybody. And in coming to terms with that and being okay with that, I don't need that instant gratification. I don't need those million followers on Instagram. I don't need those 100,000 listeners on Spotify. There still comes a point where I have to do something to advance my music career. But entrusting these answers. The things that have come over these last few months of looking for answers are not things that I could have willed into existence at all. You know, the years of forcing things to happen in my, not only in my life, but my music career, these opportunities have never showed up. So instead of trying to force, a running theme lately is that power versus force. Am I trying to, use my will and use self to try and create things to happen? Or am I going to combat self and combat will with love and with complete abandon to what this new path is, and to see what happens? Your traditional approach to music marketing is to just fucking content, fucking market it until their heads explode and finally they decide to listen to you. Where if I continue to trust the way that I've trusted lately, if these opportunities are coming, then those opportunities will come too. And they'll come when it's supposed to. I'm not trying to rush this anymore. I had big fears of approaching 30 where you don't see a lot of particularly hip hop artists break into music at an older age. But it has absolutely nothing to do with it anymore. I think not only would I not have been able to make this content at an earlier age, it wouldn't have had the same validity. I wouldn't have had the experiences that have brought me to where I am now to try and reach the audience that I'm reaching. And I'm trusting that it's going to work out as it's supposed to. All I can do is keep doing what I'm doing, try and remain of service, because that's my goal today. I'm not making music for everybody. I'm making music for the people that need my music. And I'm okay with that.
And as we talk about staying in the moment and staying in the purpose, what are the kind of things that ground you and keep you in purpose, on purpose? What are you doing?
Well, again, running back to prayer and meditation, it is an absolutely huge part of my life. But sponsorship in our program, it's been the number one thing in my program that has allowed me to start trying to live altruistically. And through the practice of sponsorship and taking other men through this program, it's allowed me to, in our step 12, it says to practice these principles in all our affairs. I didn't really understand what that meant. But now I'm taking this altruistic action and trying to take that outside of my program. If somebody needs help, I'll help them. If somebody needs to call me in the middle of the night, I'll answer. If my family needs help, I'll be there for them. And these are things that were never in the wheelhouse of Matt. As I progress in this musical field, I have a line in a song coming up, and it's like, now it's time to see the real me. My name is Matthew Robar. I lost myself inside of theory. And while I need to continue working as an artist, I need to bring the values that are true to Matthew Robar. I need to stop living this split life. And that was the main split, trying to figure out who I was and who I am as an artist. And now they have to be transparent. So through my actions as an artist and through my actions as a man, they need to coexist and to be absolutely aligned, or I'm not going to be okay with what I'm doing as an artist.
And honestly, bro, my belief again here is when you make the commitment to kind of walk the path with Creator, with God, with, God of your own understanding. And when I first started this journey, it was my dead grandmother. When you make that commitment to walk this path, you have to walk authentically. And if you don't walk authentically, it doesn't even work out. Because self and ego are so involved, the commitment to Creator gets skewed and it doesn't work out anyway. And we're forced almost to get back into force and start prying and grabbing. And I can see that has happened in my journey here and there over the last, number of years. And I've had to be aware and go, fuck, dude, you're in self again. And you're not being authentic with who you're supposed to be. And so I've recalibrated many times and it doesn't work out anyway. So it's almost to the point where if I know that I'm pulling levers, I get fucking totally scared. And I don't want to pull levers. I'm absolutely terrified to fucking not live authentically and run on my own will, trying to get what I think. Do I get caught up in it a little bit still? Yeah, but it's part of like closing the gap. Closing the gaps as I grow in understanding and effectiveness and being aware of what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what feelings does the external world make me feel, and how can I grow through that? What is it that makes me feel that? And then shedding another layer and getting back on track and working for the purpose on purpose. I do want to ask a couple questions about family, but before I go there, do you have anything else you want to say about the music or about your tracks or about what some of the lines or some of the meaning behind some of the lines are?
Yeah, well, I mean, with the new project Everest, I kept, for the first time in my life, I kept expectations fairly low, I think. And the response that I've got on this is still, it continues to blow my mind. I lost a good friend of mine a couple months ago, I guess now. And it was right in the finishing stages of this project. And there was a song that was left on that I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to stay on anyways. And this is the first significant loss that I've faced since I've entered recovery. My previous means of coping with this would be to numb myself and to crawl into a hole and not come out for a week or two. So faced with this new life and what do? Either I sit in self-pity and I disconnect from my program. I don't call anybody. I don't reach out. I don't go to meetings. I don't do what I'm supposed to. Instead, I stopped. I asked for answers. I went to a meeting, came home, had a good little cry session, and I wrote this song. And I didn't quite understand at the time, why I was making this, but the reaction that I've had to the song was exactly why I needed to do it. The song's called Upside Down and was kind of a reflection piece of kind of where I was and how sick I was and how I'm not quite sure how to deal with this today. But the first half of the song was entirely based on, we don't know when the last time we pick up that phone is going to be. I plead in the song that, instead of picking up that phone and calling that dealer again, knowing we don't want to, that you call me, you call somebody that you need to, because we never know when that last time using will be. Knowing where I was, that I was ready to overdose, I was ready to kill myself, I was ready to die, a strong part of me still didn't want to. And I know that's the case with a lot of addicts that struggle, that unfortunately, find their last breath and overdose. We never know, especially nowadays, when that last breath is going to come. And using these days is a big gamble. It's a strong roll of the dice. You hear stories all the time now of people that are non-addicts that are just, casual party people that get a bad bag and that's it. So when you're in active addiction, strong active addiction, and you're using all day, multiple times a day, we don't know when that's going to come. So I made this song because I felt like I really needed to. The response has been absolutely beautiful, but just yesterday I had a friend of mine reach out to me, and she had lost a good friend of hers to an accidental overdose. It wasn't a full-blown addict, but it, made a wrong choice, and he had lost his life, and she had sent me a message and, thanked me from the bottom of her heart for making this song. And that continued reminder of this is why I'm making this music now. This is why I've been put on this earth. If I can have something that somebody can fall back on when they really, really need to hear something, then that's what I'm here for.
Wow, dude. So, just one more round of questioning here before we shut her down. I know when I came into recovery and I've had the psychic change, and as I was going through the psychic change, because my family and the people that knew me a certain way, and then as I transformed through the change, people didn't really understand, and I didn't even understand what was happening to me. So for me to be able to explain it to others, it was very difficult because I didn't really even understand it myself. But I noticed as I was changing, the people around me were confused at what was happening to me. And I know that for me, my daughters got very resentful. My mom just kind of took it as she didn't know. My ex-wife was like, what the fuck? And they didn't really understand. So as you kind of go through your own changes and your growth and, a lot of what you're going through now, you're still in the midst of a lot of this change, and the family members and the people are having to deal with this change. How do you navigate that in a kind and loving way?
I know there's still a lot of confusion going on, and I can't blame anybody because I have no fucking idea what's happening. To go from the man that I was a year and a half ago to the man that I am today, it's been super overwhelming. Not only was I militantly atheist, absolutely no God coming near me, prayer and meditation was not a word in my vocabulary, to literally being not only a daily practice, but something that I need for survival, something that I've really warmed up to, something that I have no problem talking about. Sometimes I get this look from people in my past life if I get on a bit of a tangent, or if I'm caught praying, or I look up and I see the look in people's eyes. They're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But I can't blame them, because I would look at me like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And that's where, the firm belief that a relative psychic change has occurred. From, in our step 2, it says, came to believe that a God of our own understanding could restore us to sanity. My step 2 was, I came to believe that I would become willing to believe that a God of my own understanding could restore me to sanity. I wasn't even quite sure when I started. I don't know how you go from having absolutely no spirituality, no God, no higher power, to 2 weeks later turning your will and your life over to one and then living on a spiritual way of life. But the foundation that I learned through this program of recovery gave me the grounds to connect with one. I'm still very, very confident that I have no idea what my God is today, and I'm okay with that. All I know that there is one, and there's one acting in my life very, very strongly. And not just today. I look back and all the things that I thought that I willed into existence or kept myself alive through. I jumped off a bridge at 4 o'clock in the morning without anybody around, and I hit my head on the rocks on the bottom of the river. I busted out 3 of my teeth in the back of my mouth. That's how hard I hit the ground. But I didn't lose consciousness. And I was pretty upset when I got out of the water. That's not a human experience. There was always a power greater than myself working in my life through the actions that I did to create these characters. It didn't allow me to see it. So in this change that has happened, particularly in the last, say, 4 or 5 months, I don't blame anybody for not being sure what I'm going through, because I have no idea what I'm going through. It's been scary. It's been exciting. It's been terrifying. But I wouldn't trade this experience for anything, because I know that something's working. I know that every day I move a little bit closer to some sort of conscious contact with Creator. I know that something is changing. Every day, a little bit more and a little bit more. The experiences I have through meditation today are things that I thought that people lied about. But it happens. Through practicing these principles and trying to carry this in all of my affairs and all of my actions, and slowing down and waiting for the answers, everything that I've ever needed has come to me. I just pray that, for anybody that knew me in my past life, that they can kind of understand, hopefully one day, what I'm going through.
Roger. Big 40-10 on that ship, bro.
Big 40-10.
And I know for me, like my whole family, people that have known me my whole life, they've come to terms with the person that I am today. And like the ripple effect of who I am today influences people in a really positive way today. And that ripple effect goes out from there through them as well. And the only way I could have got here is working with my sponsor, surrendering to a God that I didn't give a fuck about either, and learning about what and who I really was. And I didn't really come here to learn anything. I came here really to unlearn everything. It's not what I don't know that's going to kill me. It's what I think I know for sure, but it just isn't true. And for me, those are the things that cause me turmoil, thinking I know something. I have to be open-minded and just let shit go as we go. And so, Mr. Matt R., it was a fucking slice and a pleasure to have you here and to get real, to get honest about some of the truth about your life and about your career and where you were from and where you're at today. So for our listeners, two things. Finish off with one message that you can give new people that are listening, or people that might have done their first set of steps. I don't know, you take it. And then let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody new, relatively new or struggling, stick with the winners. You can tell pretty quickly who's living this life. And in finding God-centered 12-step pillars in my community today, I've been able to find all the answers that I needed that I couldn't find myself. If you haven't done a set of steps, if you haven't dug into a program of recovery of your choosing, getting a sponsor that firmly believed in a God of his own understanding that could take me through this literature and help me understand my predicament and to help me find my own, saved my life. And the people that really, really work this program and get close to a God of their own understanding, it changes their life. You can see the people that are living under God, and you can see what has changed for them. Find the people that have what you want and run with that. Don't let God be a deterrent for you in these programs. If you take anything out of what I said over my whole experience, being afraid to break out of ego, to break out of self, and to try and believe in something greater than myself almost killed me. And we see it a lot. It's something that holds a lot of people back to a point that maybe they'll never find this. So just trust that, the people that have done this have kept doing it for a reason. Find something that makes sense for you and run with it, because it'll save your life. And don't stop, As soon as we think we know everything, we know nothing. Don't stop at one, keep trying to find ways to level up, get closer to people that are even more connected. Keep working your way into the community. Find something that you truly love to do, that you, to your core, know that you're supposed to do, and do that. Pause and wait for the answers, because they'll come. Yeah, thank you for having me very, very much. It's been an honor to be on this podcast. You can find me on any social media platforms, 7heory. You find me at www.theory.com. Once again, that's 7heory. Everest is now live, streaming everywhere, so you can find that on any streaming platforms. YouTube, I got hard copies available as well. We've got a ton of stuff on the go. Just linked up with a beautiful partnership with Vec Labs. We're working on some really beautiful material, so stay tuned for that. And I'm sure we will be doing something like this again in the future. So again, thank you very, very much for having me today, Bill.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for coming out, and it was a pleasure. So to the listeners, thank you for listening, and until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to the UDR CAST. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at BILLWARDLIFE to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.